Clue? Kyle? The board game? Colonel Mustard in the library with the candlestick? Guy's a real piece of shit. DarbyCast, Wildcard Friday. Kyle and I have a fascination with whodunits. You know it if you're a longtime listener of the DarbyCast, and if you're newer, if you're a little late to the party, part of me wants to say welcome, another part of me wants to say get lost, get out, run. Find a direction and run towards it. If there's a wall in your way, so be it, but full speed, run. This is too sweet for some people to tolerate the DarbyCast. It's exceptional, and I'm really underselling it, if we're being honest. A lot of the longtime listeners are like, take it easy with the modesty, will you? Tell these people what this show's really like. But a lot of the DarbyCast is one gigantic murder mystery of saying, who's killing the country? And the inbred class of psychopaths with a God complex that, for one reason or another, people describe as the elite. Oh yeah, that makes very little sense to me. But I feel like the quote-unquote elite, they get to choose their own call signs, right? And be like, hey, should we call ourselves the elite? Sounds pretty badass. And it's like, listen, elite would suggest that you were good at stuff. And you know what? They are good at stuff. Making people bummed. Manipulating financial markets. Treating people like garbage. Good job, elite. You're doing great. Kyle shared a thought with me the other day. He's like, aren't the elite just like people with names and addresses? And to that I said, yes, Kyle. And then he followed up. He said, don't we outnumber them? And I said, yes, Kyle. And he said, aren't they terrible people that are making everybody's lives miserable? And I said, well, yes, Kyle. A lot of yeses coming out of me, being directed at Kyle. And then Kyle asked me the big question that I think many of the people in this world of ours have asked themselves, like, why isn't anybody doing anything about it? Why aren't people pulling these people out of their houses and stringing them up from lampposts and saying, we like Wild West flicks and this is a noose and we're going to play hangman. And you can't guess any letters. Game over. You're done. And that is imagery. It's some kind of imagery. Some people right now, they just got startled and they were like, that's so inappropriate. And then there's heroes listening to the podcast who are asking themselves, like, why isn't fire involved in what you just said? And I love that. Flaming rope, for sure, metaphorically, as a social construct. But Clue and board games, let's pivot, right? It's getting a little out of control. We got to reel it back in a little bit before we kind of disco the ones and twos and take this thing to a level that isn't okay by most people's standards. Losers, but let's set the stage for people who are not winners nor losers, but are trying to figure out where they're at in the grand scheme of things. And the best vehicle to really do that is the game Clue, right? Skills required, deduction. Sherlock Holmes, ever heard of him? Good dude. Deductive reasoning skills. But as a DarbyCast doctor, let me tell you this. If you've listened through the entire catalog of episodes and really soaked it in, Sherlock Holmes, by comparison, might look like a 3-year-old trying to read a New York City subway map. And that's really cool when you think about it. You're an adult, comparatively, and you're not in New York. Yuck, right? Somebody needs to just nuke it. in a spiritual sense, metaphorically, as a social construct. You understand? But Clue, also known as Cluedo. Why does it say Cluedo? Or is it Cluedo? But let's get back into Clue. And for those of you who haven't played a board game ever, or haven't played Clue, or maybe it's been a while since you played Clue, let's get into it. Murder mystery game for 3 to 6 players. Talk about a friendship kind of evening. Have you had a rock solid friendship night recently? Do you do that at least once a week? Get together with some friends and say, let's put on some Frank Sinatra, cook up some pasta, drink a glass of milk. Those things all sound very appealing, do they not? Think about the bozos who don't like pasta. Think about them for a second and be like, who hurt you? People who don't appreciate a glass of milk from time to time, not to be trusted. Game was first manufactured by Waddington's. Great company. British company out of Leeds, England, for those of you who are curious, which is most of you. Now it's owned by the American toy company Hasbro. And I don't know what Hasbro's up to. They're probably making Ken dolls that you can rip the dick off and put a wig on. And then it's like, it's Barbie now, right? I don't know. Maybe Hasbro's on the level. They probably aren't, though. The object of the game is to determine who murdered the game's victim. Like I said earlier, the game's victim, if we're looking at this in a zoomed out sense, obviously the United States of America, our culture, and everything we hold near and dear, like puppies, sunsets, clean sheets, running water, roads, Thanksgiving dinner, Christmas morning, bacon cheeseburgers, tasteful one pieces, gravity-defying jugs, JC, the nuclear family, optimism, these sorts of things. Each player assumes the role of one of the 6 suspects and attempts to deduce the correct answer by strategically moving around a game board representing the rooms of a mansion and collecting clues about the circumstances of the murder from other players. So what does that really mean? It means that the killer's here. Dirty trick, masquerading around, and then accusing the other players. For the younger listeners of the DarbyCast, think of Clue as a lot like the newer game Among Us, where you have to figure out who the imposter is as you travel around a space station. It's a little bit more visually stimulating when you're playing a video game, but if you're a purist and a stalwart intellectual, you go for Clue and you go for a friendship night. You get together with people and you crack out a bottle of wine that costs over $15. And you say, Gladys, mind if I give you a refill? That's right. Maybe you invite a senior citizen to your game nights. And at the door, you do a mask check and you say, take that fucking thing off, Gladys. Right now. Joke's over. And she's like, I know, I was wearing it as a joke. And she's not even kidding. She was wearing it as a joke. Because she's like, I'm not buying this whole thing. Make friends with seniors. That's a big call out on this DarbyCast Wildcard Friday. Huge call out. But you're in a mansion, you're collecting clues, and you're trying to figure out who this godforsaken traitor is amongst your ranks. Is it Professor Plum? Is it Colonel Mustard? Is it Miss Scarlet? Is it Reverend Green, otherwise known as Mr. Green? Is it Mrs. Peacock? Is it Mrs. White? Now, naturally, the corporate media would try to convince you that it's always Mrs. White. But that's not the case. A lot of the times it's Colonel Mustard or any of the other ones in probably a standard distribution. But that's not how the real world works. Murderers don't exist by chance. They've had their hearts touched and caressed by the devil, Satan, Lucifer, Beelzebub, and many other names for that slimy, no good, shifty-eyed bestiality aficionado. That's what Satan's about. Let's give a little backstory to Clue and the guy who created it. Great guy, Anthony E. Pratt. Beautiful spirit. You can tell when somebody tries to communicate what's really going on in the world through a board game, you know they're on another level. This guy wasn't inventing a board game for sheer amusement. He was trying to communicate something. He was saying, there's a traitor in your ranks, and you got to sniff him out. And when you find that guy or lady, or, if you broaden the scope of the game, maybe it's a bunch of guys and a bunch of ladies, you string them up. You don't accept any of the apologies. When they squeal and they say, oh, sorry, I've murdered somebody. And it's like, I don't believe you. You're not sorry. I am a trained detective, the likes of which Sherlock Holmes wouldn't even be able to comprehend. I've been trained by the best liars in the world. Anthony Fauci. Have you ever heard of him? They say our enemies are our best teachers. And so if you want to figure out how to level up your detective skills, boy, do you have a lot of material from which to draw. World War II, Anthony E. Pratt is in England, Birmingham. There's bombings going on, and he's not about it. Also, this dude was a musician and a factory worker. Brains, brawn, creativity, get out of town. Great guy. He loved Agatha Christie novels. And can we just take a time out to reflect upon how impressive Agatha Christie was? Best-selling fiction author of all time. Her novels have sold more than 2 billion copies. Not the sexiest lady you've ever seen, but in some cultures, she's as hot as they come. 1944, Pratt, Anthony E. Pratt, inventor of the game, applied for a patent for his invention of a murder mystery themed game originally named Murder! Little on the nose, not exceptionally nuanced in its titular significance, but like all creative minds, he had to refine his process, and he didn't call it quits. He said, okay, let's keep going. Shortly after he achieved the patent, this was before the intellectual property game was nuts, a legalistic jungle with beasts lurking in the shadows. Who are those beasts? That's right, massive corporations with humongous legal teams just waiting to find somebody with a good idea, bury them in litigation, and then steal their ideas. Thankfully, for all of us, this didn't happen to Tony Pratt. His wife, Elva Pratt, helped him design the game, and she helped him pitch the game. Let's pause for a second and talk about how good that feels. A unified couple hell-bent on a mission. How many times a day do you think they looked each other in the eyes, recited the words organically? It was not mechanical or robotic in the slightest. They just felt compelled to say it. They would catch each other from across the parlor in their house, say, I believe in you. And then the other one would say, I believe in you a lot. And then they'd try to one-up each other and be like, I believe in nothing more than I believe in you. And then the other one would be like, I believe in everything about you. And then finally, one of them would say, and I believe in our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And then they'd bone. Talk about a power couple, right? original game included 10 characters and 11 rooms. That got scaled back probably by the creeps and scoundrels at the Hasbro company. They're like, hey, let's make this game less complicated. It's like, shame on you. Haven't you heard? We've got a future generation of extreme sleuths that are going to be able to handle all 10 characters, all 11 rooms, and frankly, are probably going to be asking for more characters and more rooms. Original cast: Mr. Brown, Mr. Gold, Miss Gray, Mrs. Silver, Nurse White, Colonel Yellow, and then you got your industry standard: Miss Scarlet, Reverend Green, Professor Plum, and Mrs. Peacock. Rooms of the house that were eliminated: the gun room and the cellar. You're going to take out the gun room? I knew it was the work of the commies at Hasbro. They don't like it when you have the means to defend yourself. You think murder's going on in that mansion if everybody is toting a Tommy gun? Get lost. It becomes an awfully polite mansion when everybody is armed to the teeth. Original version had 9 weapons. But a lot of those weapons got removed, and some of them were sweet. The bomb, the syringe, the cudgel, there's a beat stick, the fireplace poker, the axe, and poison. Okay. I think all of those would be okay to use on the murderer once discovered. That should be kind of what you do after a game of Clue. It's a little bit of kind of an epilogue to the game. Once you finish, you'd be like, well, we've discovered who the murderer is. What do we do to him? That is kind of like a group creative jam sesh. And I think in that kind of cool down period after you catch the murderer, that's when Gladys really shows up in a huge way. And she starts riffing on some stuff, and it's going to raise some eyebrows, but it's also going to make you hopeful for the future when she says something like, we're going to use the bomb to blow the murderer's feet off. Then we will use the syringe full of adrenaline, liquid adrenaline. It's an EpiPen. And it's like, Gladys doesn't say that in the text. She's like, well, I'm a creative soul. You knew that. It's like, all right, you are. Then she continues, jack them up with an EpiPen so they can't pass out. Then you're going to take the cudgel, the beat stick. It's like, I like how you said that, Gladys. Beat their legs senseless. It's like, that's not how legs work or beatings. And she's like, oh, then you've never had the sense beat out of your legs. And it's like, you come from a different time. So I'm going to take your word for it. She wouldn't stop there. Got that fireplace poker? Am I allowed to use all the objects? It's like, yeah, Gladys, go ahead. Take the fireplace poker, get it hot as humanly possible, and lightly tap dance on that murderer's nipples. It's like, whoa, Gladys. Please continue. Got the axe and the poison to go. And then she says, well, if we're going to do this thing right, we're going to smear the poison all over the axe and pass it around, and everybody gets to take their hack. But I get the last one. And you know where I'm going with it. And then she kind of cackles a little bit, and it's like, whoa, Gladys, I'm never playing Clue without you present ever again. You need to be here every time. I will pick you up. If those cataracts worsen and you lose your driver's license, you can count on me to be your personal chauffeur, Gladys. I treasure you. And the oddly specific violence zipping around that beautiful brain of yours. Clue was originally marketed as the great new detective game, which is a bit of a misnomer because it's a game that's as old as time. Find the traitor and hurt him in a big way. Every society throughout history, written history, has always suffered from internal turmoil. And it takes special people, detectives, and followers of JC to step up and say, I've had enough. I'm sick of my housemates and, by extension, people living in this country. I'm so sick of them getting murdered. I've had enough. But it's weirder now, the real-life version of Clue, is it not? Where the murderer is like really talented on social media and is like convincing people to hurt themselves and go crazy and take themselves out of the game. Or they're opening the front door and being like, bring in the Haitians. Bring them in. Or they're calling family meetings, and the audacity of those people to call a family meeting. It's like, you're not a part of this family. You're not. But they play a convincing liar, gather everybody in the dining room. They say, well, nobody can leave this room until you all inject yourselves with these syringes. I'm looking out for you. And it's like, you are immediately incriminating yourself. I don't know any other family member of mine that's ever called a meeting, whipped out a syringe, told me I couldn't leave, and desperately encouraged everyone in the room to inject themselves. What's that about? You kind of just like outed yourself as a psycho. I would love an updated version of Clue where everybody in the house has national, stage, cultural, or political significance. It's like Rihanna, Lady Gaga, Fauci, Joe Biden, Jill Biden, Joe Biden's dog, Peter Daszak, Jim Comey, Hillary, Jerry Nadler, Jeff Bezos. And then you throw in a fun one like, I don't know, Harry Potter. And the big plot twist is they're all murderous psychopaths trying to kill each other. There's no one innocent in that entire house. Kyle, is this my calling to make this board game? You think I'd be murdered unironically and not in any kind of fictitious way for creating that? I'm probably on a couple of lists just for doing this podcast. So be it, Kyle, because you're also on those lists. Ducks fly together. Have you ever seen that movie, Kyle? You're a little bit younger than I am. Mighty Ducks. What about D2? Quack, 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 Mr. Ducksworth. Do you remember that? Do you have any idea what I'm talking about? Fun fact, in 2016, Hasbro, run by elites, most likely, inbred psychopaths, depraved human beings, cursed to walk the earth without souls, only brought joy, inversely proportional to the suffering they create, but it's not real joy, it's only transitory. What a cursed existence the people at Hasbro have. They kicked Mrs. White out of the game. They didn't just kick her out, they replaced her with Dr. Orchid. And I can't really go into that. Expounding upon something like that puts you in kind of a category. But anywho, the weapons in the game, the candlestick, the dagger, the lead pipe, the revolver, the rope, and the wrench. Mainly melee weapons, unless you're throwing the dagger, which is pretty cool. I wouldn't be unimpressed with somebody who could expertly throw a knife from range with accuracy. As I know none of you would really scoff at that either. You'd be like, do you want to, I don't know, maybe grab a bite at Outback Steakhouse? Tell me your story. Tell me how you got to be so fucking sweet. They're not going to turn down an invitation like that. Offer them a bloomin' onion. Be like, yeah, I got this gift card to Outback Steakhouse 13 years ago, and I haven't used it because I never really go there, but I just get this feeling that you're the right person to ask. Rooms of the house, the kitchen, the ballroom, the conservatory, the dining room, the cellar, which they wanted to pull out of the game so bad. I don't know why cellars freak out the creeps at Hasbro, but the billiard room, the library, the study, the hall, and the lounge. For those of you who heard the word conservatory and went, hey, what's that? Think of it like a solarium. Moving on. love that there's a dedicated billiard room. It's not for darts. It's not for pinball. It's billiards and billiards only. And it's certainly not pool, right? What a difference between people who play billiards and people who play pool. You're not supposed to say that in today's politically correct climate, but there are people who play billiards or people who play pool. The study in this mansion, you better believe it's got a chessboard where people pit their wits against one another and say, I challenge you strategically. But there's also a chessboard in the lounge. And talk about a life worth living, right? You live in a house with multiple chessboards. And we're not talking some garbage chessboard either. We're talking about hand-carved pieces made out of rhino. How you came across those, you never have to tell a soul. But that's a pretty cool chessboard. The library, obviously, contains a Bible, the first Darbyshire book, the second Darbyshire book, a lot of things by Walt Whitman, Henry David Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson, C.S. Lewis, George Orwell, Ray Bradbury, Agatha Christie, absolutely zero Stephen King. What a pervert that guy is. I don't know anything about him, but I saw a picture of him the other day and I was like, you have disgusting thoughts about everything. I've never read a Stephen King novel, nor will I ever. That gentleman's got a dark soul. He belongs in the updated version of Clue, along with the rest of that cadre of morally corrupted demon folk. Let's talk about some interesting mechanics of the game that shed a lot of light on human nature. Mrs. Peacock has the immediate advantage of starting one space closer to the first room than any of the other players. Why? Because she is a dignified lady who's married and she's getting ahead in the world. She has a business, but she took time off to raise her children beforehand. And now she's a little bit ahead of the curve. Professor Plum can move to the study and then take the secret passage to the kitchen, the hardest room to reach. Now let's really pause for a second and talk about secret passageways. Even more than owning 2 chessboards in your house as a sign of immense success is a secret passage. You tilt a book sideways, and then the bookcase opens, and then all of a sudden you are in a command center with robots that respect you, and they have British accents because that's what makes the most sense. Life doesn't get a whole lot better than that, aside from being fundamentally spiritually sound. Because you got to live in the world, but you can't be of the world, right? Do you understand what that's about? You must, if you're listening to this. Miss Scarlet has the advantage of moving first. Why? Hot chicks get to do whatever they want. That's not inaccurate. Hot people get to do what they want, but especially hot chicks. Under one condition, that they've got pure hearts. Because eventually, a hot person with an ugly spirit, the tattered tapestry of their heartstrings withers away, and they become destitute in every sense of the word. Now, I suppose we could get into the game mechanics, but I don't want to rob you of the experience of learning the game yourself. Playing it, buying it. Purchase a copy of Clue. Purchase it. And if I can make a recommendation, you get the 1988 version. Clue, Master Detective. 12 rooms, 10 characters, 8 weapons, support for up to 10 players. Now that is a house party. Let me drive home the point about Gladys. If you don't invite a senior to show up, that's not okay. Good catch, Kyle. Good catch. I didn't describe the characters of Clue in great enough detail. And that builds our enthusiasm when we really know about these people. If you haven't gathered some of the info already based on inference, you're not where you need to be in terms of your Agatha Christie / Sherlock Holmes skill set. But it can be refined. Let me tell you about Miss Scarlet. Industry standard hot chick, young, cunning, never wears a bra because she doesn't have to. And nobody calls her out on it because they're like, that place. Even chicks are looking at Miss Scarlet and being like, you've really got something going for you, babe. Colonel Mustard, hunter, dignified, dangerous. Sleeps with a 50 cal automatic machine Desert Eagle pistol underneath his pillow. And sure, that wasn't invented back when the game was first concocted, but the inventor of the game, he knew that something like that was what Colonel Mustard was all about. Mrs. White, cook, housekeeper, and she's seen a lot. Widow of a nuclear physicist. Reverend Green, don't be fooled by the name. He is not filled with the Holy Spirit. Deceptive in title and appearance. Mrs. Peacock, elderly, yet incredibly attractive. So well put together, doesn't get caught up in BS. Moonlights as an ornithologist, specializes in birds of prey, knows how to ride a motorcycle. Professor Plum, cultural anthropologist, as a hobby, professionally archaeologist. Fascinated by saber-toothed tigers. Now, like I said in the beginning, because this is a game, a board game, any one of these characters can end up being the whodunit in chief. But in real life, and Professor Plum could tell you this, the tiger cannot change his stripes. Have a friendship night. Ask your closest pals, guys and ladies, get them together. Put on the Sinatra. Throw together a charcuterie board. Include grapes on that charcuterie board. It's a nice palate cleanser. That's it. That's life. Because there's a lot going on in this world of ours. But you need to take that time to recharge, to reorient, to get to the bottom of things. Because the game of Clue is about finding out who's who, right? And we're not talking about a childish version of that game called Guess Who, which should be adapted to an adult version to include murder and more strategy, if we're being honest with ourselves. Recharge with friends. Figure out what's really going on, and then you game plan. You say, Gladys, how bad do we need to hurt the culprit? What do we need to do to these people or this person? What makes the most sense? And she's going to tell you things that blur the lines between justice and war crime. And you have to just be okay with being in that space with her and with your other friends and be like, all right, that's that. But that's DarbyCast. That's Wildcard Friday. Play a board game.